Welcome to Vinfolio on Periscope. We are honored here today to be joined by Conrad Kenley, who is one of the country's great wine collectors and one of our best friends here at Vinfolio. This is the first time I've had the pleasure to meet you, but you've been a friend of Vinfolio for a long time, and we're really glad to have you in here. Obviously, if you're watching on Periscope, we really encourage you to ask questions and interact. That's one of the fun things, and then we'll put this up on our YouTube channel afterwards. We have a few wines that we're going to taste or we're going to talk about, but I think the focus today is really going to be about wine collecting, about sort of the depth that people go and the passion that people have for their wine, for wine collecting, the culture around it, and just how it affects sort of a little bit of everything you do in general. I mean, all of us across the board here are sort of nuts about collecting wine, and that's why we're in the business, in the industry. And it's a passion that again overflows to a lot of other parts of our lives. So we're really looking forward to it. We've been looking forward to this for a while. So thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me, Ryan. This is going to be an experience, I can tell.
Joining us as well, we have Stephen Beer, who's the president of Cellar Services here at Vinfolio. And another good tie-in to the beauty of our storage program, as well as just the idea of collecting in general and what it means to collect with us at Vinfolio, and what kind of value it adds to your wines and what kind of experience that we provide in general and what the value of that is. So we'll get to it. We'll talk about wines. Can you give us a little bit of an introduction? What was your sort of first passion for wine? What made you start to collect wine? Was it something that was a family thing? Was it something you discovered when you were traveling? What was the genesis of really wanting to collect wine and having it be a significant part of your life?
Well, it's a long story, but I'll shorten it to say that it depends on what you mean by collect.
Yeah.
My early wine experience had nothing to do with family, but probably college days, drinking as cheap wine as we could find, whatever was on sale. And later, in a professional career in traveling is when I really became introduced to wines in the restaurant setting, mainly.
Okay.
And that's why I say that it depends on what you mean by collect, in that nothing ever saw 5 years. Nothing, because it was just California cabs. These were wines made during the early 90s, for example. That we just said, look for them on the list and order them up and try to drink all that they had. And take a trip to a wine store and buy a few cases of wine, and when they were gone, go get a few more cases.
What were some of those original labels or some of the wineries? You remember some of those that you originally were pursuing?
Sure. I remember very distinctly Cayman's Special Selection, which resulted in an embarrassing situation with the CEO of a major corporation. We were dining together. He happened to be a personal friend, and I ordered up the wine. The Somm said, "We don't have any more of that. You drank it all." This is a New York restaurant.
Drink the restaurant out of their wine.
It was that and the introduction to the wines. I spent some time in England even before that, and got introduced to Bordeaux there, but I didn't like it at all. That was the late 70s, and I was not turned on by Bordeaux at the time.
It was a dull decade for Bordeaux.
Yeah, so that was really, I guess, the first introduction to what you would consider high-end wines.
Mm-hmm.
But was there like a particular moment that was sort of a moment where you felt like you got wine or got the whole idea of going from some maybe lower end or not so much caring about it, but all of a sudden kind of grasping what you were looking for?
Or let me put it differently. What was your epiphany bottle?
That's right.
What was the epiphany?
Thank you. That's what I was trying to ask.
The epiphany bottle was probably for Cabernet. It was something like an 85 Heights Martha's Vineyard, something like, as I recall. Mm-hmm. But they were all different. In fact, the question you asked about what got me into what I considered high-end wine, I was dating. So the idea of a date wine then, something cost close to $20 a bottle. Mm-hmm. That was like really a Chardonnay or something like that. I was looking at wine from that perspective. Most of the wine I consumed out at restaurants. But the first epiphany that older wines, and then later went back through the courtesy of a close friend and tasted some of the 70s Bordeaux's in the mid-90s when they had about 25, close to 30 years of age.
Right.
And then I was beginning to get an appreciation of what happens to wine. At first, it was all drink them on release.
Right.
And
right.
by happenstance, I might find a bottle that had some age to it, but it would just be a coincidence.
I think it's fascinating because a lot of people that get into wine, you sort of, everyone has their favorite or has their passion, whether it's California Cabs or Burgundy or Italy or whatever it might be. But I also find that every serious wine collector has an evolution of what they enjoy and what they taste. I mean, I remember when I first got into wine, it was all about Brunello and Barolo and Barbaresco. And then I worked at a winery where they were really passionate about Chateauneuf. And then I worked at a Bordeaux house where it was all about Bordeaux. And through those experiences, for me, it was life experiences, but also folks in general, when they discover different regions or different characteristics about a wine or older wines, it definitely evolves. What would you say your biggest passion is now insofar as what you collect?
Oh, it's become more than a passion. Obsession.
Obsession?
I liken it to a drug habit.
A drug habit.
A drug habit. It's an addiction. I have gone through phases, as you describe, of different varietals and countries where I've experienced the wines. Buying actively now, it's pretty much Burgundy and Champagne. Mm-hmm. I vowed to stop buying wine many times.
That's one of the questions I was going to ask you. How many times in your life have you said,
Many
I'm
times.
not buying any more wine?
I've only been successful with regard to Bordeaux, and I stopped buying Bordeaux with the 2005 vintage.
Okay.
And I vowed to stop buying Burgundy with the 12 vintage, but I have not been successful with that.
That's great. Well, we're actually looking at a few bottles of wine here, and looking at the wine's not really helping anything. So we have a bottle that you brought along first, if you want to describe it as I pour it around, and then we'll talk and taste, and I'll pour the red out as well.
That is a 2005 Corton Charlemagne. The producer is Bono du Martret. Happens now to be one of my favorite producers from that appellation. But this appellation was my first introduction to white Burgundies. I thought Burgundy was basically just red wine when it was first introduced to me. And the first white Burgundy epiphany was 1990 Louis Latour Corton Charlemagne, which I tasted at a wine event, Masters of Food and Wine, some years ago. And I didn't know that Chardonnay could be that good.
This bottle, and this is one of my favorite ones to collect, the Corton Charlemagne's. First off, as a value, as relative value in Burgundy.
In Grand Cru Burgundy especially.
It's an amazing value. And each vintage is so different than the next. The 5 is crisp. You get then into the 6, which I always thought had like a bananas and esters type of flavor to it as it got warmer. The 8s, 10s, it wasn't as highly regarded. The 7 came out super highly regarded. 10, greatly regarded. They age well. They drink well young. It's just a great wine.
Well, it's interesting the way you just ran through the vintages. One of the things that happened once I began collecting, with buying a lot of wine, is I tend not to taste the wines early unless by chance I happen to be at an event or a dinner. So this wine, and there is an interesting story about this. I was at an auction not too long ago, and I was with some friends, and we were all bidding aggressively. And we'd say, do you want a case of this? And somebody said, yeah. So, okay, get 2 cases. So I wound up with 3 cases of this wine because those friends forgot that we were supposed to split those cases, which is one of the reasons I'm now drinking the 05 vintage aggressively. But and I've got a ways to go before I progress through some of the more current vintages.
But Vinfolio Marketplace Services can help you.
Ah.
We can sell those bottles for you. If you have extra,
I have had
someone
this-
else wants them.
I have had this conversation. There's only one time that I ever sold wine, and that was principally Bordeaux. I thought once I began collecting, probably around aggressively when you talk about auction, maybe 12, 13 years ago, I thought I would drink Bordeaux every day. And so I bought cases and cases of Bordeaux. As it turns out, I love Bordeaux, but I rarely drink Bordeaux. so I was sitting with an imbalance. But other than that, my intent is to drink every bottle. If anything's left, it will just be a coincidence.
But there'll be a blowout party if there is.
I'm trying
there
as
won't be
fast
anything
as I
left.
can.
Or you somehow didn't match your actuarial table to what your expectation for the wine was.
I'm working on it. Every year I make a New Year's resolution to open 1,000 bottles that year from my cellar. And I have not been successful. I have gotten to a little over 800. And it looks like I'm going to be around that level this year.
So we got a question. We're drinking a Grand Cru White Burgundy, and you mentioned, Conrad, that you like to let these sit for a little bit before you drink them. Do you think it's generally a good idea to let Grand Cru White Burgundies age longer than maybe folks might conventionally age them before you drink them? Like, do you like on the latter half of the aging?
Well, I have friends that would want to drink this wine at 15 to 20 years. No, I'm probably with Grand Cru White Burgundy. I'm in the 10 to 15 year range where I appreciate it. There's still some freshness to the fruit.
But evolving of secondary characteristics, which bring it into
is
it.
still there. But I'm not a person that really chases old bottles. Generally not.
Now, if you obviously, I personally, I feel like I have a little bit of a tendency to drink more wines on the younger side, and I think it's part of sort of
The fact that you're younger.
The fact that I'm a little younger, but it's also a little bit of the industry we work in, and a lot of the stuff that we're working with is current vintage availability and that kind of thing. But obviously, it depends on how deep your collection is as well, to the fact that you can be drinking as much wine at the kind of age range that you sort of want. So there must have been a development in your collecting over the years where you started to have older stuff because of the depth of the collection and what have you, right?
Well, that's where the math comes in. I said I try to open 1,000 bottles. What I didn't mention is that my cellar grows every year.
Right.
So you need to open more
Oh,
bottles.
wait, so
So-
you're
so
actually
what is-
losing pace still? I mean, you're
Yes,
still
I'm actually.
okay, good
So,
for you.
which creates the effect that you just described. I can't get to them young because I'm still, drinking those that I think are in the drinking window, and sometimes I miss. I remember some experiences with whites from Italy, like Suave and so forth. 10 years, too late.
The toast.
I mean, you could drink them with a cigar, maybe, but they're not. You wouldn't want to have it here.
Now, you mentioned that champagne, I love champagne. So white Burgundy champagne to me, if I had to stick to two and somebody said, it's all you can have, I'd probably pick those two. I find them interesting. I think champagne's the perfect way to begin any evening.
Absolutely.
It's a great way to end any evening, and oftentimes it's actually a good way to get to the intermezzo of the evening as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts on aging of champagne, though, because there's a lot of thoughts about how long it sits in the barrel until they bottle it. Then also how long you age it once you have it. So talk to me about some of your champagne experiences, old and young.
Well, it's interesting you mention that because the good news, in one sense, is you get to have it both ways now with all the late disgorgements, which I think is a big marketing thing for the champagne houses, because the late disgorge is roughly twice the price.
Right.
Of what the
Or
current
more.
price is.
They're going to do
Right.
what used to be
Okay.
Anatech, and now is the
So,
P series.
Latitude, yeah.
I do have a preference for vintage champagne. So then we get into, like any other grape, what's the ageability, and I find that for the top vintages in champagne, I do enjoy the wines. In fact, I'm looking forward to opening a Dom Perignon 96 Unitec this evening. So yeah, I do prefer aged champagnes. And I particularly like that the late disgorgement gives you, even more freshness, but you're still experiencing the vintage.
Right. I mean, we're talking about a wine, the Unitec, that's approaching 20 years old, but that release was just a handful of years ago, and so it's still showing. And there's very few wines in the world that you can have that kind of experience with. And you talk about the patience, and there is a lot of marketing. There's a lot of premium for champagnes and for formats, but one of the benefits of that is the fact that you do have a lot of stuff coming out of the cellar that already has the age on it, that already is developed, that they're following the development of the wine, and it's very unique to. You get that with some older, sherries and ports.
I think champagne's just learning from the bourbon industry and from the Scotch industry.
I tend to look at champagne as white wine, frankly. I mean, to me, it's white wine, and I view it pretty much the same way. Although I'm with you, I rarely start a meal without starting with champagne. Rarely.
So this brings up a conversation that we've been having a lot. That is about when I talk about the fact that we end up experiencing a lot of younger wines, we end up doing a lot of decanting to sort of aerate them and obviously get them in a better place when they are on the younger side. So my first question to you is: do you tend to decant your wines, or do you find that you're drinking them at an age where you're trying to find that sweet spot where they're showing well when they're open because they have the age on them?
It depends on the wine. Now, some of my collector friends would accuse me of often committing infanticide. So, in those instances, and including Burgundy, I will often decant. And that's frowned upon by lots of people.
Right.
I will, because it does need the air, especially if it's going to be drunk pretty quickly, table of four. Right. So, yeah, I do believe in decanting. I must have a dozen decanters of my own. In fact,
do you have a go-to decanter? Or do you use them all? Do you use all dozen?
No, a couple that I use frequently.
Right. Is it the one that's easiest to clean?
Yeah.
That's
right.
That's what happens, right?
The long necks and all kinds of complications.
I have a lot of them that I don't use. They look really pretty, but then when I found out how hard it was to get that red wine stain off the bottom of them, they didn't come out.
Well, I've had parties where people are walking around with decanters. So we're opening stuff up and pouring it out.
So right now, this temperature is exactly where I think this wine should be. It's showing everything that the Pinot de Martre shows. It's got the bite, it's got the citrus, it's got the vanilla, and some like
little butterscotch,
white flower notes on it, and all the things in the wood. It's perfect.
It's a beautiful wine.
It is.
It's
drinking. It's making me. I have this wine back to '96, so it's making me think better. Drink up. Open the '96.
Some of the '90s are getting a little bit flat. They're just getting a little flat.
Sooner rather than later.
So what do you think about decanting champagne? Do you ever do that?
I have done that. Some of the Solos wines, for example, I've done it. Don't usually. That's probably one of the exceptions. The Jacques Sauce. Typically, I wouldn't be decanting like the '96 DP Unitec or anything like that.
So what do you get? I've never decanted champagne. What would you get out of decanting?
Yeah, just the same thing as we're getting with the white wine. It's a big wine. I'll decant some Chablis, for example, Les Clos. They need air to express the food.
So if you're trying to go through 1,000 bottles per year, how does that break down in your mind? Is that a bottle per meal? Is that a couple bottles to a party? What's
your breakfast wine?
Yeah. What's your nightcap of wine? What's your breakfast?
Okay.
Well, anytime I'm dining, and which is why I love to be in San Francisco, most of the time I'm dining with others. So I'm opening at least 2 bottles. at least.
Now, are you always opening 750s, or do you buy large formats also?
Both, of course, yes. The large formats have come into my life.
So how many bottle equivalents do you open up?
I haven't done that. I'm probably approaching much closer
To the 1,000.
to 1,000. For example, where was I recently? The Blue Angels in the air show.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had a little party here, and I opened 6 Magnums there, but I only count those as 6 bottles.
That's 12 equivalents. You have to change your numbers.
Now we had 29 bottles, including those 6 Magnums.
So that was a good amount to pay down towards your 1,000.
Right.
We have a question. Speaking of restaurants and wine, what is your most unusual food wine pairing, but yet sort of your go-to wine pairing?
Unusual.
Maybe someone thinks it's unusual, but you say, "Oh, this is definitely a go-to pairing for me that I'd like to do consistently."
I'm just going to think of, I'm a creature of social media, so I post the wines that I'm drinking via Delectable, and I was in Portland, Oregon at a brunch and was having French toast, and I was having, I believe it was a Clos de Bez, someone said, and I posted when
That's one hell of a brunch.
think, French toast. And someone said, "Oh, sure. When I think French toast, I think a lot of that." So it was sort of like a joke. I had gone to the restaurant, and the place specializes in charcuterie and all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. I just happened to order some French toast, and I had this wine, so why not?
Why not?
Right.
Why not? There you go.
If it works and it's good.
So you talk a little bit about the fact that you are still, you keep saying I'm done buying, and then you keep buying. Do you find yourself in a situation where you're tasting wines that you really enjoy and you want to find more of, or are you more tuned into new opportunities that are coming out, like the next great vintage of this or that, or being on the mailing list of certain wineries?
Well, I've scaled back the mailing list purchases considerably, but I'm probably still on half a dozen or so. Mm-hmm. So I take those allocations. But I have become wedded to certain producers.
Okay.
And I mentioned this being a drug habit. If you have a drug habit, the dealers find you.
There you
So
go.
what happens is there are always offers, and you try to resist them. They know your favorite producers, so you're going to get offers from those, and often the pricing is attractive.
Sure.
So what drives it is, I know what I like in terms of the styles of certain producers in the regions, and they produce wine every year.
So what list are you still on? You said you got it down to half a dozen. That's got to be a pretty select list. Is Camus still on it?
No. I'm trying to get away from the cabs. I don't think I'm on. Last one I got off was Bryant. I'm still on Peter Michael's list. That was one of my early date wines.
There you go.
Chardonnays.
Oh yeah, right there.
And so I take an allocation there. William Sellium, Rocchioli. Mm-hmm. I'm on some. I belong to a wine club in Oregon, and it's run by a small wine shop that introduced me to Pacific Northwest wines in 2001, purely coincidental. So we have a relationship, and that's probably the short answer is I'm on the list where I have a relationship with the producer, personal relationship with the producer, or such as this with the club. Verite is another one. They do a lunch for me every year, so I go there.
I don't remember seeing you at the release party. So it must be,
Skip Stone. I was just there for a birthday lunch with my girlfriend.
They do lovely wines.
They do lovely wines, and so I'm on lists like that. They don't probably make a lot of sense in that I'm taking wines like 2012, 2013 vintage, 20-year wines. I'm fairly optimistic, but I don't need to buy a lot of them. I'm buying mainly because of our relationship.
Sure.
So now everyone, then a slightly different take on that. You have wines from all over the world. Have you traveled to each of these regions to get that personal relationship with the vineyards, the terroir, the winemakers, or is it really something you're doing almost from afar?
In the case of wines made in the United States and California, Pacific Northwest, yes, I've traveled and met and know a lot of the producers. In the case of France, I've met and know some in Bordeaux and Burgundy, but that's it in France. I've never traveled to Australia. I have been in Australia, not the wine regions.
Right.
The same is true with Italy. I have been in Italy many times, but never in the wine region.
How about the Rhone region? That has been
Not
absent
been
in the
in the
conversation.
only in
Do you
Burgundy.
drink Rhone wines?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I am a fan of Rhone wines, and well, I should say that the Côte Rôties and the Châteauneuf du Pape are a pretty good representation of those wines. I don't get to drink them as much as I would like. I need to find occasions to open more of the wines, and I look for occasions or themes. So
do you plot the occasion to the wine or the wine to the occasion when you're thinking of what you're going to drink through the year? Do you try to plan occasions to drink the wine?
more spontaneous. For
Yeah.
example, on a given week or weekend, I'll decide just to drink wine from a particular vintage, regardless of where it's from. Like the last few days, I've been drinking 2002 vintage. Don't have it. I just said, oh, let's pull some 2002s from Champagne, Burgundy, and I'll do that. It could be California Cabernet. Just a way to get at some bottles that otherwise I have no idea how they're drinking right now.
So obviously if you've been collecting wine all of these years, you've seen a lot of change, a lot of prices skyrocketing in the industry. What do you think insofar as the big stylistic changes that you've experienced that have really made wine drinking that much more enjoyable for you?
Well, interestingly, the style change has been to make wines more accessible young. And I say that particularly now we're talking collectible wines that could age, absolutely can age. When I started drinking some of the greater wines, the thinking was really you should let these wines age 10, 20 years. Bordeaux is a good example of that. And now I find many are accessible younger. Friends of mine, we did a lunch and dinner with 17 vintages of Amand Rousseau, Clos de Bez. The wine that blew us away was the 2010. And I never would have called it. They had other great wines. We started at 89, but I would have thought, don't even bother to taste the 10. It was the opposite. And on the other hand, I haven't been, so I can't really answer to the Bordeaux since '05, but I did go to a Latour tasting where Latour brought the wines and they said, we're not even going to bring 10 because it's impenetrable.
Yeah.
You can't. So the statement I'm making is a general statement. Not all wines are now much more accessible, young. And I know the trend, John Bonnet, friends with him, read his book, so-called skinny wines approach. I am still an unabashed follower of Robert Parker. And I don't mean that so much today, Robert Parker, but his tasting of Bordeaux, California Cabernet. If you go back and read his notes on those vintages, and you're tasting the wine, he's nailing it in those cases.
It's amazing because the sort of the not only beyond the accuracy, but I feel like akin to, and I think that's one of Antonio Galloni's strengths right now, is that reviewers are telling much more of a story now than they ever were before, and I think that has helped sort of develop people's sort of knowledge and preferences, and as opposed to back in the day when folks were following Wine Spectator or drinking this particular wine, It's more of this is an individual who I really trust or believe or put my faith in or whatever. You think there's a big upside for investment, but you've also probably experienced more great wines than than most everybody. So you have the opportunity to sort of make up your own opinions more often than anybody else. So do you have a little bit of a blind eye towards the critical market because you sort of know what you like and you've been through all that, or is it still a sort of vital or a good reference point for you?
Well, even I'm not a professional taster, and I'm
You're definitely
doing my
semi-professional.
bit. I'm
1,000
doing
bottles
my-
a year, you're a semi-professional.
But that's not the people who are out there doing this for a living are tasting far more wines than I could imagine, and so I still rely on those who I know their palate. Take Alan Meadows in Burgundy. We've become personal friends, and I tease him all the time that I'm going to wind up drinking all this wine in my 80s. But if I know the palate, Jancis Robinson, I follow and look at. The main thing I'm looking at, assuming I bought the wine already, I've made a judgment, is the drinking window. Because managing a large cellar, I actually spent quite a bit of time figuring out what wines I want to open from I haven't tried it in a long time. Is it in the drinking window? And I do rely on some of the critics for that.
And that's what you talk about Berghound, because usually Alan Meadows, his drinking windows, give you about 20 years at the start, where you're looking at. He has one of the biggest far out perspectives for any of the critics out there for their drinking windows.
I had dinner with him a few years ago, and I said I'd like to organize a dinner with all the producers of Musigny, and he said, I might be able to do that. So I went out to auction, bought these magnums of Freddie Mounier, Ogwe, 93s, in both of those cases. And then he changed the drinking windows. I said, kill it. Yeah, 2018 on those wines now.
So did you defer the dinner?
I have not done it. No, I could
You got
have
the wine,
waited
but
to
you gotta
buy
wait.
those very expensive wines.
January 1st, 2018, you're ready to go?
So even that, these critics change their minds, and Parker does the same thing and updates. But it's guidance, because I don't think it's, unless you're in the business of tasting, which is different than just opening bottles and drinking. I've seen Parker taste, and they'll go into a restaurant in the afternoon like this, 100 wines, or something like that at one time. And so you get the benefit of that by trusting their palate.
Sure. But at the same time, you open a bottle like this, the Baume de Martray, 2005, and you form a pretty strong opinion about the fact that it's ready and it's at a great place. But you're definitely right, and I've really found that when I started learning how to blind taste, how much it's a practice thing, and how much it's something that, just like anything else, the more you do it in that kind of style, not just drinking wine or tasting wine, but having 100 wines in front of you and having to make a educated description about all the nuances about the wine is a completely different thing, and it's part of the industry, but it's also very much a specialty.
That's true. I don't pretend. I have many friends, a court of master sommeliers, and I know they have the whole grid that they use to taste. My thing, I just don't want to put anything in my mouth that I don't like.
That's a good rule to live by. Something that you touched on earlier, question from the audience, young Burgundy versus old Burgundy. You said your preference is not super young, more toward old, but not super old, right?
I'm somewhere in between. I have, let's say right now, I'm drinking and opening 2007, as some of you are going to find out in a few hours.
Right.
And I chose that vintage this evening to taste with you because I think those wines are accessible right now, even up to the Grand Cru level, because, in Burgundy, you got this whole classification system. So when I say age, it's relative to the level of the wine. But generally, 07, and I've had that experience with the 2004 vintage. So I wouldn't consider those old, but they're accessible. If I were drinking a vintage where I'm pretty certain universally it's pretty ready, it would maybe be 93 right now.
That's a difference, 93 versus 2007.
Yeah, because of the difference
Yeah.
in the vintages.
Okay.
Sure, and we've talked about it a lot, where it's about being able to find your preference in the scheme of things, not about the fact that this vintage is going to be better than this, but there are so many nuances to it, and it's also about your personal preferences. Where do you like to enjoy wine? What about it, that primary, secondary, tertiary characteristic of the wine do you really enjoy? And that obviously makes a big deal. And then the stature of the wine, it's going to change how it ages and how accessible it is. Talk about Bordeaux being relatively inaccessible and just incredibly delicious when it's inaccessible young, and incredibly delicious when it has age. It definitely changes it at all. So you've been really involved in collecting wine, and with a lot of, you said you've traveled, you've talked to winemakers. Have you ever made wine? Have you ever been on the production side, or have you developed the knowledge of that part of it through your experience?
And is that necessary, do you think, for appreciating wine?
The answer to your last question, no, but the answer to your first question, yes. In 2012, for my 60th birthday, I blended a wine. I did not have anything to do with the growing grapes. I was in St. Helena after lunch, a pretty boozy lunch, and went to visit a winemaker. I'm not supposed to say who they are. I bottle under my label. And they were sitting with their feet up. They said, we could pick any time. It was October.
Right.
And I said, I've been thinking about blending a barrel, making a barrel of wine. And they said, sign right here. and it was a fun process. I came back the next year. That was the 2012 growing season. And I came back, tasted barrels, bunches of barrels, and came away with a thought of what I would like to put together in a bottle. And then came back, met the winemaker, did the whole blending thing. It was a fun experience, I will admit, and the wine turned out pretty good. In fact,
Started with a good vintage, though.
You
tell me you did in 2011. Tell me you did in 2011. I'll be like, you're a master.
The winemaker called me and said, have you tasted that wine? I said, oh yeah, I think it's going to be even better with time. So I got lucky.
So don't tell us the winemaker, but valley fruit, hillside fruit.
I can tell you, it's 75% Cabernet, 50% of that is Calistoga, and 25% Rutherford, 20% Merlot, and 5% Petit Bordeaux from Howell Mountain.
Okay.
Great. The Merlot is, I should say, Combs.
Comes well.
Mm-hmm.
So did you
All right,
bottle
I
this
got the
for
wine
yourself and for
Yeah,
friends?
oh yeah, it's in
There you
your
go.
warehouse. I've only pulled a few bottles. It's 2012. Now, see, that's a vintage that I think I have bought 2012 Cabernets, and I generally don't touch them for 7 years, even to see how they're drinking.
I like him at California Cabernet at
yeah.
10 for a well-made wine is when they really
Yeah.
start to get pretty.
But with 250 or something bottles, I've been giving some to friends just to let them have a try.
Now, your last year of Bordeaux was 2005. Have you
Yes.
tasted any of your 2005 Bordeaux yet?
Not really. I haven't tasted them since they were released. I did get to taste on the release, but not really. No, just laying down.
We did a dinner of, I think, 10 of them a few weeks ago. You can wait. You can wait. You can wait. Well, don't even think about it for the 10 years, to be honest, 5 to 10.
Well, my calculation was that I would be drinking 2,000 right now, and I have been opening some 2,000s and having the same conclusion. Need to wait.
A few more.
Mm-hmm. So that's one of the reasons I haven't been drinking very much Bordeaux. I have some, of great vintages, great wines, but those are not every day. You don't want to open an 89 Aubryon or an 89 Petrus just every day. I don't have that much. I would say I would open just every day.
What I just had last Friday. They don't have beyond.
I wouldn't open them every day.
Now, how about, but see, if you open up an 86, I think the 86s as a class are still 5 to 10 years away from being in their prime window.
86 is one of those long.
It's just hard as rocks, and 3-4 hour decants to get there.
Yeah, 2010s will probably be like that in good time.
All right, question from the audience. You're stranded on a desert island. What are you bringing to the desert island? Your only choice. You can only bring a case of something. Not a mixed case.
Not a mixed case.
Yeah, we're talking but year-end wine.
It can be magged, but just in case.
It's
got to give us a vintage.
It's going to be champagne. I'm going to say something that I'm probably going to open. It's probably 88 right now in Magnum. I'm going to one of the newly minted 3-star restaurants with a Magnum of DP Rosé 88.
There you go.
So it would be champagne, it would be Magnum, it would probably be a vintage like that.
Steve, Brian, you bringing champagne to the island?
Bourbon.
Bourbon.
To Desert Island.
Why are you in this
hot.
room?
It's Desert Island. It's hot, and I can't keep it cold. I'm bringing bourbon or rye. Don't be silly.
He said desert island.
No,
That's
okay.
what gave me
If it was a nice island with cool temperatures that changed out there and keep my wine
right.
cold, white Burgundy, and it would be as long as it's one case. I'm going to bring a Montrachet of somebody's. We'll figure that out. This actually would be one of the wines. It would cross my mind is to bring in the Bonneau de Martre though.
There you go.
Just because it's
good.
It's just a great wine.
Courton Charlemagne, as I mentioned, was my introduction really to really high-end white Burgundy. But my hierarchy has remained with Courton Charlemagne and Chablis at the top. Mm-hmm. I have a fair amount of Montrachet, but I prefer Courton Charlemagne and Chablis.
Now, do you have the show? Is there oysters on the island? Because they're going to go great.
Yeah, I suspect there are.
If it's in the Pacific Northwest.
There you go.
We didn't say where the island was.
All right, now our hands have naturally drifted to the red.
Mm-hmm.
So, would you mind giving us?
This is Ryan's giving us
Well, this is Ryan.
explanation.
So, Ryan, I guess you're on point for.
This is a 99 Roche de Belém. Let me get this up to the camera here. Chambon Moussinier. This is something that we have available at Vinfolio, something that we tasted a few weeks ago. You got that there?
Yep.
All right. Something we tasted a few weeks ago at Vinfolio, and it's just one of those you really find a lot of age in Burgundy at a reasonable price point with I don't know this kind of prestige. And we tried it a while ago, and it really is something that we just enjoyed around the office, and so wanted to highlight it. Wanted to get your opinion on it. It's from Nicolas Patel's Negociant project, Roche de Belém, and it's again it's a little bit of that sweet spot wine. It is just a Premier Cru, but it's something that is ready to drink right now, and I think it's really true to its place. So,
Is this a Premier Cru?
oh no, sorry, it belongs to BB.
Because you don't find many
Yeah,
Chambon
right.
Moussini's Premier Cru at reasonable prices.
All
Because of
depends
who
on what's
owns the
reasonable.
Premier
Right,
Cru.
right, right.
There are not a lot of people that make Premier Cru from Premier Cru vines in Chambon that sell at reasonable prices. I mean, you're talking Beauvais, you're talking
Right.
Rumiere. This is a nice wine, and you picked my favorite commune in Burgundy is Chambon. I like the violet spiciness of these wines, and the age, great. 99 is a vintage that I find still drinking very young. Mm-hmm. And then that's pretty much across the board I'm finding in Burgundy.
Yeah.
I don't open many 99s.
It's significant tannic structure in here, and it is starting to open up a little bit. This is something that we opened up probably about an hour before we brought it in here, so probably about 2 hours ago. Mm-hmm. Do you find yourself, if you're obviously I don't know if there's much need for blind tasting or doing that kind of thing, but you find yourself if you pick up a glass, if you delve that deeply into Burgundy, that you really are finding that sense of place, that you're picking up a glass and saying this is Chambon or this is a specific Grand Cru or Premier Cru or a specific area? Is it that?
Yeah, well, I don't claim to be able to make the distinctions. The major communes, yes.
Okay.
But where it is on the hill and
Yeah,
I'm
no,
not
yeah, no.
Which
pick
row?
that up.
Which row came out of?
And we'll have some fun with that tonight. But when I'm tasting Chambol versus I'm in Bon Romani or Gevrey Chambertin, which actually Gevrey Chambertin was my first introduction to red Burgundies were from Gevrey Chambertin, which I guess makes sense. So many Grand Cru wines there. But yeah, I at least know my preferences now.
Right.
Where I
Right.
a hard one would be, say, Maurice Saint Denis. Would be a tough one to distinguish in some cases.
So you feel like you have a pretty good sense of your preferences. Question we had a minute ago was, what advice do you give to a new collector starting out who, just getting into it, maybe doesn't understand their preferences as well?
Make friends with old collectors.
Well, there is that saying, and I enjoy wine in sharing it with people. So when I dine at restaurants, I tend almost always sharing wine. But what I would advise is don't worry so much about, quote, collecting. Just taste a lot of wines. Don't worry about investing in a whole lot of wine right away, because as you taste more wines, you'll figure out what you like from a region, great producer. I wouldn't rush to lay down a lot of wine.
I mean, there is a tendency amongst collectors, right, to start off, get very excited about it, and then build out a fairly large collection right away, when you'd advise maybe hold off on that part of it a bit.
Well, as young as you guys are, I'd absolutely advise holding off. Because there's going to be plenty of time. I shouldn't say, probably half of the wine that I have in my cellar I purchase at auction. So if you really have to have the wine, you can get the wine in some way. But getting a sense of where you like wine from and what wines, I think that's more important.
Right.
One of the things I would suggest to that person is find a really good local wine shop, because they're drinking all the time, they're tasting, they'll find things for you, they'll work with you on
Yes.
price ranges and experiences and all that. And a good local wine shop is a great way to.
Or talk to one of your wine specialists at Infolio. Why not?
Well, the best part is with the internet, where are your local wine shop wherever you are?
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree with that 100%. And there was a phase in which I did that. I would go in and they would suggest all these wines to me that I had never had before, and I'd buy them. And that's really good advice.
Like if you live in the Bay Area, over in the East Bay, we have Kermit Lynch. And to walk in Kermit Lynch and to get an idea, I mean, they're fantastic about inexpensive wines, introductions to regions. You're not buying the Grand Crus, but you're at least understanding what they're about and seeing them in their lesser modes, what shall we say.
Don't let Karen hear you say that. They don't sell inexpensive wines here.
No, I know that. But
They'll edit
again,
this out of the tape.
no, but again, young collectors become older collectors. Their tastes change. To exclude someone in their purchasing habits at a certain phase is to lose them later on when they are in your window. So to be open, to share, to understand, there are no limits here.
Wine or jazz? What's your choice?
It's a tough one.
Just ask from someone who clearly knows that you like
It's a
jazz.
tough one. I was recently elected chair of the board of the DC Jazz Festival, and I assumed a position with the caveat that I would travel to jazz festivals that are proximate to wine regions. And so I've been to Portland Jazz Festival, Healdsburg Jazz Festival. Here in San Francisco, it's a tough choice. Last Saturday, I went to a great show, Wayne Shorter, at the San Francisco Jazz Center, and dined with some wine friends after at Zuni. So certain
you got the
times
both.
you can get them
Beth-
both
Beth-
in,
Beth.
but typically I'm having to give up the dinner in order to catch the jazz set because of the hours,
Right.
We talk about Burgundy a lot. One of the most, I think, Burgundy can be one of the most intimidating regions when you're getting into wine or trying to understand, or even some dedicated collectors. It just seems incredibly complex. What for you has been the best way to either get a handle on? Is it traveling? Is it tasting? How did you get a handle on that? What's the best advice you have for people that are trying to love Burgundy and understand it at the same time?
Actually, my best tutor was Alan Meadows.
Yeah.
And if you've ever experienced a lecture or talk by him, you realize that he would never stop the day and you're going to learn an awful lot. And so most of my introduction to Burgundy, at least to be able to discern the places, before I even traveled there, I did some things with the French Embassy in Washington. They had a wine program. And then it was going to events. Paulé is a good example of that. I go every year. You get to taste new releases of Burgundy. So it's like anything else. It's spending some time and committing to learn more about the wines, where they're from, at least, to be able to communicate as a buyer, if you will, as to what it is that you're interested in. And then through wine lists at restaurants. There are some restaurants that I go to that have really good Burgundy lists, and I'll take that occasion maybe to buy a bottle of something I have in the cellar, but I haven't opened it if their prices are reasonable.
Sure. Do you know any producers personally, or through your travels, or has that been a good way?
Sure. Speaking of, you asked the question about recognizing where the wine was from. So I'm in the cellar of Drouin, and Veronique goes and runs. We were talking, was standing over a barrel. She said, "Oh, I'm coming right back." She comes back. Everything's unlabeled in a cellar. So she pours the wine. I taste the wine. I know it's from Chambolle. Is it Les Amoureux? She says, "No, it's 82 Moussigny." And then I immediately get a note from her brother, like, "What?" I don't even get to drink that. So, yeah, where else? Jadot. And I have been inhibited in not speaking French. Every year my other resolution is I'm going to learn French. That hasn't happened either. So, but that's on my wish list to
Is that advice for
learn.
a starting collector? Learn French.
Well, if you're going to be attracted to French wines,
Okay.
it is a plus. There's no question. I have friends who are fluent. It does make a difference.
I bring my wife. She's fluent, and she charms the hell out of them
There you
while I
go.
drink.
It does make
the
a
best
big
part is
difference.
I can't even slur my words. They can't tell after a while. It's
It
just
makes a big
English.
difference.
It's just different languages.
What do you find? Is there
Different origins.
something that helped open doors for you, or to meet these producers, or was it the holy, or was it just?
Well, again, you go back to this drug habit thing. If you're buying a lot of wine, you'll have introduction to. I have been fortunate, for example, to receive a direct allocation from Wilson Daniels, the importer, and that helps if you want to go and visit,
Of course.
someone that they distribute from. But that's just the economics thing. If it were, my preference would be if I spoke the language, then I could have more of a social relationship with them.
Of course.
I only have that with a handful.
No, wait, I have to put a commercial. I'm sorry. It's too many buzzwords doing it. We have actually, we are the storage and logistics partner for La Poulet now in San Francisco. And we have been for years the partner for Wilson Daniels' DRC program in the United States. So,
I know.
The Vidfolio connections, one step removed, but you're talking our area. If it's fine wine, we want to be in all aspects of it. We're selling it to you or storing it for you, or making sure it gets to you properly.
Now, you're really good at that. I always tell you that. This is not supposed to be a commercial, but
It was for me. I couldn't help myself. After the Colonel Lynch comment, I had to say something.
You went and ran with it.
Storage in the warehouse, I've said this many times, that is one of your true unique competitive advantages.
Let me ask you a question. Given your collection, given that you are a user of our Vin Cellar tool, could you own as many bottles as you have? Could you have as large a collection as you have if you did not have an electronic record-keeping system?
I couldn't. My memory is getting worse all the time. So, no is the simple answer. And even if I tried to do it with spreadsheets and so forth, I think with the velocity that I'm drinking the wine, it wouldn't be manageable. So I would have had to have adopted some cellar management software.
Now, is there anything that I feel like there's two kinds of collectors? Someone who doesn't mind opening bottles at the occasion, the age is right, and I'm sure that's the kind of collector you are. And I find myself, I have a small handful of bottles, but there's these couple bottles that for one reason or another they're special bottles, or they're bottles that I made at a winery or whatever it might be, that I just can't bring myself to touch. Are there any bottles in your collection that have a special meaning to you that drinking them would be is hard, or you keep looking at them and thinking about it?
No, I don't approach it that way. And there's the dearness of it.
Yeah.
I look at the fun of it. For example, when I arrived here first of this month, I have a lot of Francophile wine friends here in San Francisco. So the first thing I did was organize a 1997 California Cabernet dinner. We started Screaming Eagle, Harlan, Colgin, Bryan, Arajo, right down the list. And I had to drag them kicking and screaming, but they loved it, and it was fun. Now, would I open a bottle of 97 Screaming Eagle just for the heck of it?
Yeah.
Probably not, but that occasion made it all worthwhile.
Sure. So when you taste stuff like that, is it? I feel like a lot of the conversations that people have about wines, you walk out of the room and what's the best, or is it more about at that kind of level you're just trying to appreciate the character?
It's taste. Some of the people at that table prefer older wines, and they would have had a preference, probably leaning towards the Arajo, as I recall, one of them. My favorite was the Screamer, and not because it was Screaming Eagle, but it was just such an impact, like party on the palate kind of wine. And I do, if I had to put myself in a range of drinking older to younger, I'm more to the younger side than I am to the older. But it's a matter of taste. I don't think you can say better.
So few people have had a chance to drink 97 Screaming Eagle. Tell us the three things that remain in your mind about that bottle that night.
Well, the first thing is to finish, because I could still taste it.
That's
the
great.
fruit just explode, and then you realize how balanced the wine is. You can't say, and there's a lot that's been said about 1997 Cabernets, bad things. But all those bad things you hear, you absolutely would not say them about that wine. The 97 Harlan was not far behind, although I've had some bottles of 97 Harlan that VA and other issues. But this is why I say you can't say categorically anything about the vintage or grape.
Well, that's one of the luxuries of having
Fruit, the balance, and the finish on that were just phenomenal. And in the company of the other wines that we were drinking.
Right.
And one of the luxuries of having such a deep collection is being able to not only experience the wines, but form those opinions and form them strongly, and be able to avoid and not have to necessarily listen to the stereotypes and the sort of the talk and the hype and all that.
I always, and that is is an advantage of, as you're calling it, collecting or having a lot of wine. Because you hear these things, and you ask yourself, how many bottles have you had of this wine before you say that? And to have the luxury of having the wine often, whether it's a vintage or a region or grape, is helpful.
Yeah, I find there's a trend where a region of vintage becomes very popular, and the trend is there's a lot of hype and everyone wants to buy it, and then all of a sudden it becomes passé and everyone likes to talk a little bit of trash about the vintage. You look at 2007 Chateauneuf for 97 California cabs, where at times it's the most exciting thing, and then 2000 in Piedmont, but then they become these sort of, easily talked about vintages, but it's not necessarily coming from oh, I was drinking this and I don't necessarily believe in it, and it's a lot of the conversations going around in the wine world. So it's obviously fascinating to be able to make up your own opinion, and that's one of the most vital things in this landscape is that there's a lot of scores, there's a lot of press, but obviously getting your hands on the bottle and getting an opportunity to make up your own mind, figure out what you think about it, figure out how you prefer the wine is just the beauty of drinking a lot of wine or collecting wine or whatever you want to call it. It's just one of the, I think it's one of the driving passions. There should be a driving passion about folks that really like to experience the best in wine. So I think that we're going to wrap it up here. I really appreciate you coming by and sharing your time and your perspective with us. We're going to keep enjoying wine with you for the evening, I think, and it's really special for us personally and for our clients to be able to have a conversation with you and sort of take a little bit from your wisdom and your experience, and we really do appreciate it. So thank you very much for joining us. And Peter,
we got one final question to sort of wrap up some of the themes we've hit on earlier. Wine for a date night. What's it got to be? This is a question for the group. What bottles? What's the combination? What are you bringing for a date night?
The one with the highest alcohol.
You got
All right,
Zinfandel at 17 and a half.
Are we married or single?
I'll start here because for me it's a personal thing. When I got married and we moved out to California and I worked at a winery in Southern California called Zinequanon, and it's always been a sort of a special place for a special time for me and my wife because we had a kid, and that's our special occasion wine is enjoying a Zinequanon, and it's not obviously the caliber of the wine is really high, but it's more of a personal place and time for us, and it's a memory, and so that's if we can pull it off, that's the day night wine.
He's committing infanticide.
Yeah. Zinequanon, I like those wines. Date night, I'd probably go with a Chardonnay. Probably be safe, something like a Peter Michael or an Aubert, one of his winemakers.
Guaranteed to impress? Is that the idea?
Yeah, because I think it's because people who are not, really into wine, if you say Chardonnay, what they're thinking is Chardonnay by the glass at your local bar.
Right.
And it's just such a difference when you trace a well-made Chardonnay.
Take them to the next level.
Take it to the next level. So
it's
that
immediately the
impact
impression
that
is.
you want.
Yeah,
Doesn't
you're
have
blowing
to
their
be-
mind.
Doesn't have to be coastery, but just something at a level that's apart. From
It's kind of about exceeding the expectation.
right. That's the point of it.
Now I know neither one of you is really a wine aficionado. I don't care what they want. I'm bringing it for me anyway. So
Are you married?
Yes, I am.
Bring whatever your wife wants.
So I'm no, because she's
You
going
have
to
the right answer.
She'll have a glass, and I'll have three.
Just
I
whatever
want to
your
have
wife
what I want.
wants.
So it's going to be something really good.
That's great. So we're going to be up. We're going to be up on. We're going to put this up on our YouTube channel. We'll put some clips up. Please keep following us on Twitter. We'll let you know when these tastings are coming up. If you have any questions to follow up, please tweet us. Let us know. And obviously, the most important part of this, besides the wisdom we want to share, is really interacting with our customers, our clients at Vinfolio. So we really enjoy having you along, and thank you very much for joining us. And a great thanks to Conrad for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you. It's
Thank
been
you,
fun.
Conrad.
Thanks, Conrad.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.